everybody. Welcome back to the show, Science Dispatch Podcast. My name is Cameron English. I am your host, joined as always by Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, it's so nice to see you. How are things?
It's nice to be seen. It's nice to be seen. It's closing in on what will be Father's Day for both of us, though my children are old enough now to ignore me, and your children are not old enough to send you cards, but your wife will.
It's going to be a great day. I refer to it more honestly as second birthday because it's a shameless excuse for me to buy gifts for myself. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Very nice. And it offloads work from your wife, who's already, I'm sure, burdened with other things to do. This way she can concentrate on just celebrating you emotionally, and you can take care of the
I'm a giver of gifts to myself. That's how I live life. In all seriousness, yeah. With that in mind, happy Father's Day to all you gentlemen out there. I hope you have a great one. By the time you hear this, it will be Father's Day. So I hope you enjoy some time with your families. In the meantime, we have an exciting story to talk about. Chuck, this is your second piece in the last, I want to say, month or two about micro and nanoplastics. This is all the rage. This seems to be the new endocrine disruption because it's in the news constantly.
Yes.
So this article here you wrote, it's called With Every Breath You Take, How Microplastics Invade Your Lungs. Pretty ominous, Dr. Dinnerstein. Here's your summary, and then take it away. So you say, in an invisible dance, micro and nanoplastics move about ubiquitously, yet unnoticed. These minuscule particles bob and weave into every corner of our existence, yet their impact on our respiratory health is unclear. How do these particles navigate the pathways of our respiratory tree, and what does this mean for our well-being? Okay, what does it mean, Dr. Dinnerstein?
We don't know. There you go.
Okay. Have a terrific.
For tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you. Send donations to...
So the bottom line is that we really have no idea what these nanoplastics can do, but by raising the alarm, we can get funding to do more research to find out more things. So what we do know about these materials is that once they get into your lung, they can interfere with the surfactant, which is the fluid lining your lung that helps keep it inflated. It's the chemical that premature babies frequently don't have. That's why their lungs don't fully expand. Surfactant is the reason that you can blow bubbles. It's like soap. Soap is a form of surfactant in water, and allows alterations in the surface tension so that, in this case, the lung can stay open. It also affects the cells in terms of their ability to move mucus out of the system, as well as, always the case, it causes inflammatory changes. These are all things that we have found to be true in the laboratory, but we have absolutely no evidence that it's actually occurring in the lungs, nor do we know what it ultimately will mean, though, as always, we will say that, people with chronic obstructive lung disease, which I would add parenthetically mostly comes from smoking, are at greater risk with that. So I was drawn to the study because of, I think, some deficiencies in my background. My first deficiency was that I did terribly in physics in school. I would like to report that. I was good with physics during the mechanical part, but once we got to magnetism, which was invisible, things began to fall apart. And then when we got to nuclear energy, I was through. So that was always a big deficit in my undergraduate education. So when I came to vascular surgery, I discovered that the physics underlying that part of our biologic system is very much like the stuff that Newton covered. So I was happy to get back to it. And so when I run across these studies that talk about physics and health, I'm more drawn to the ones that have some biomechanical basis for it. And in this case, what the study looked at was a model of microplastics, looking at how their shape and their weight altered where they might be deposited, because as I said, we know very little about what they do. So when we talk about microplastics and now nanoplastics, these things are far smaller than a hair. They're smaller than red blood cells. They are very teeny. And what they found was, and this would go along with things that we would think from basic physics, is that the heavier the particle is, the less distance our lungs move them. So heavier particles tend to wind up in our throat and trachea, where they can be cleared by the normal mechanisms of mucus and such. And that the smaller particles, because they're lighter, tend to travel farther. They tend to travel deeper into the lung passages, and these are the ones that may be implicated in the problems that I mentioned before. The other thing that I thought was interesting was that the shape of the particles made a difference. Cylindrical particles kind of were streamlined, and they got into the airflow, and so that they could flow longer distances. Particles that were irregularly shaped would kind of bounce around and get stuck earlier on, and they tended to lodge in the large areas. And that was the sum and substance of the paper, and that's what I wound up talking about there. There was one piece at the end that I think that was critical to the conversation, because now that we've all been informed that micro and nanoplastics are everywhere and they can be a health hazard, the immediate response has been that how are we going to regulate them? And we've begun regulating them by getting rid of plastic bags, and we've begun regulating them by getting rid of straws and other forms of plastic. All well and good. But the fact of the matter is that the major source of microplastics are your dryer, from your clothing, and from cosmetics. So if you're that concerned about these things, and I'll leave that to you to have your own level of concern, stop wearing makeup and start wearing natural clothing. Give up polyesters, and then you're safe. You don't even have to worry about a regulation by the government.
My next question is, how long until they start freaking out about micro cottons and nano cottons from these renewable, sustainable bags? Because, and I mean, I'm being sort of tongue in cheek there, but this is the progression of these various public health and environmental causes is, first it's something that's clearly harmful, like lead. And then as time goes on and we get lead out of the water supply and lead out of the gasoline and lead out of the paint, then it's, some other additive that's in a widespread chemical that we all use. And then after they get rid of that one, then it's the new additive that they replaced the last additive with, right? So for years and years, recycling plastic was indeed pushed as a sustainability solution, but now a lot of the NGOs have moved on to the idea that not even recycling plastic is good enough. We just have to get rid of as much of it as possible. So in other words, I guess I don't know where I'm going with that, except to say, is this just the latest, greatest fad? And pretty soon, micro cottons or, some other super tiny particle is going to kill you.
Well, it depends on how well they do on the funding. I think if they get enough funding for the microplastics, it's going to keep them busy for a while until we have some definitive guidelines that have no impact. I mean, what I find fascinating is that everybody wants to regulate the part that doesn't impact them. One of the biggest places that plastics have made a dent in the world is in the food chain. You can't go into the Cracker Barrel store anymore and get yourself a shovel full of cereal or beans. I mean, you can do it at Whole Foods for one of their dispensers, or at least the pre-COVID Whole Foods. But you can't go into a store and buy 4 Brillo pads or a head of lettuce. Everything now comes packaged so that it can be easily shipped. And most of that packaging is plastic. And so when you say, well, if you're this concerned about, plastic, are you willing to give up lettuce 3 months a year? No, not so fast. And so I think that gets at the problem of microplastics, which is a high-income country problem. and not a problem for the rest of the planet.
Well, you're getting at a really good point, which is the trade-offs involved here, right? So if you can't use plastic to preserve food, you're going to increase food waste. Of course, food waste is a significant contributor to greenhouse emissions. The methane that comes from the food we throw away is significantly higher than the greenhouse emissions from plastic production. No one ever talks about that. They will talk about them in different contexts. But the whole system is connected in many different ways. And that seems to be excluded as long as people can feel good about, voting for a bill or, buying a cotton bag or whatever it is. And the researchers can get funding.
Right.
That's the study we should do, Chuck, is what's the correlation between the amount of funding researchers get and the next public health scare? I'm willing to bet there is a statistically significant link between the amount of money people get and the evidence for whatever. Yeah.
I would not be surprised.
Okay. All right. To get back to the science of this as we wrap up here. With a lot of studies like this, well, and this is a modeling study, but you mentioned that there's a lot of cell culture work that's done to look at microplastics. And that happens with a lot of different substances and exposures where you could take liver cells or lung cells or what have you, and you can expose them to some sort of chemical. And then you can get a result that seems important. But the reality is like that cell line isolated from the rest of the organ and isolated from the rest of the human body is fundamentally different. And I think you've made this point on multiple occasions that we have to be careful with this kind of research because it doesn't necessarily reflect how your body metabolizes something. Is that relevant here?
It's certainly relevant. Now we have a progression in the sophistication of our methodologies, but we're always, stuck by our pride. We no longer have to look at the result of these kind of studies looking at flat cell cultures because there's very few places where there's flat cells in our body. Our cells are incorporated into three-dimensional objects like the lung or the liver, and so that there's multiple cells in multiple layers and there's an interaction between the two. So we have made progress, and now we have what's called organs on a stick or organoids. We have very preliminary versions of 3D forms of the brain or the liver or the kidney, and the studies are being done on these three-dimensional objects. And while they are a better approximation of our organs, they remain a very crude simplification. And so we should be happy that we're getting better at it, but we should not believe that we've reached what we would consider, ground truth about our biology. It may be past our pay grade. We may have to ultimately accept the fact that it's past our pay grade to really understand how we work.
Yes, there's definitely a mismatch between our ability to study issues versus our everyday experience. It's just hard to quantify sometimes. And frankly, as a new dad, I have so many real things to worry about that I know could threaten my kids. I don't have time or energy left to worry about this. I don't know if that makes me a bad parent or not, but microplastics, are you kidding me? I'm worried about can they choke on this toy or not?
Really? Exactly. There's many more real world day-to-day problems that we have to deal with. That's why this microplastics is a first world high income country problem. There's still places on the planet that we're having problems getting water and food. And if you give it to them in a plastic bag, they would be quite happy.
Well, but that's a very good point as we wrap up here in that, if you can wrap something in plastic, you can ship it much further. So if there's poor people that aren't getting enough calories, if you can wrap a cucumber in saran wrap or whatever, you better do it. That's much more important than, the latest fluid dynamics study of microplastics.
I suppose, but I have a soft spot in my heart, as I tried to indicate, for these kind of studies.
I got to tell you, I started reading about particles and waves and double slit experiments, and I just was like, nope, this ain't for me. I can't do any of this.
Well, you see, now that was the beautiful thing about vascular surgery, is that it's an applied art. So the things that I learned about the blood flow were just to give a context to the situation. It didn't ultimately change what we had to do, but it did help explain some of the innovations that we had. And I'll just throw in one, and just because I know that it's killing everybody, but what the hell? It won't be the first one I took out. That when an artery separates into two, when it bifurcates, there is an ideal size to the two vessels that come off from it, and it's more than half. It's actually 3/5, 60%, and that's based on physics, and it has to do with the flow. And when you have two vessels coming off at 60% because of the cross-sectional diameter, blah 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 blah, that keeps the flow the same, and that's the physics. But that's the way nature designed us. So there's a real interplay between the basic laws of physics and how it manifests in biology that has to leave you with a feeling of awe or wonder.
Yeah.
I'm done now.
Well, that's a great stopping point. Very insightful as always, Dr. Dinnerstein. Go check out this article. It is on our website. As I said, the title is With Every Breath You Take, How Microplastics Invade Your Lungs. And if I might add, Chuck's commentary on this is good because it's pretty balanced in that he's outlining all the issues and is explaining the science as opposed to just trying to scare the hell out of you to get some clicks for some ad revenue, which we don't get, by the way. There is no ad revenue for ACSH. So if you come, that's right.
Yeah, we have no ads.
That's right. Yeah, so we won't try to sell you a T-shirt or I don't know.
I know it's not easy being an industrial shill without ads.
How can we be corporate whores without ads? It's not fair. It's not fair. I don't like it. All right. Okay. Well, there you go. We're not going to sell you a Bible with the Constitution appended to the front. We're not going to try to sell you cosmetics. Just go check out the article, and if you find it in your heart, drop us a little tip to keep this work going. But until then, we'll see you next time. Follow us on social media. It's at ACSH.org on Twitter, and I am at CamJEnglish. Send us questions and comments for the show. We'd be happy to hear your suggestions. And that's it for us. We'll see you next time.